Tonight on Free Minds TV, we're going to be having a special episode. We're being joined by Dennis Goddard from New Hampshire Capital Access TV to discuss, well, all forms of activism as well as the recent primary elections here in New Hampshire. That's coming up tonight on Free Minds TV.
Welcome to a brand new episode of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. It is episode 174. Wow, it's been a while. And it is Toby here with you.
And Nick.
And joining us, special guest. I think I've been on your show before, but this is the first time you're joining us from New Hampshire Capital Access, Dennis Goddard, as well as all sorts of other political stuff here in New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. And we're going to be getting into all the really busy stuff that you are doing here, what's going on in New Hampshire. But the reason we wanted to bring you on the show today is, well, to one, it's the election season, and you're probably more embedded with that as far as liberty stuff goes in New Hampshire than anyone I know, as well as talk about the Free State Project and liberty activism in general. As a lot of our viewers know, we're broadcasting from Keene, New Hampshire. We are on lots of stations in New Hampshire, as well as, I think, like 10 or 20 throughout the United States.
Mostly Maine. Well, United States. Mostly Maine and Mass.
Area, but we're on in some different spots. But anyways, we are broadcasting from Keene, New Hampshire. New Hampshire has chosen as the Free State Project, a movement to bring 20,000 liberty lovers to one state and hopefully fight for as much freedom and liberty as possible. And New Hampshire was chosen, and there's been some backlash from that, particularly in Keene, where a lot of the liberty activism has been civil disobedience, and
it's been public. It's gotten a lot of attention. It definitely has gotten its attention. It's been positive attention.
And the question is it changing the hearts and minds of people? Is it making people want to go more towards liberty, less towards liberty? And we want to discuss that a little bit, but we also want to focus in on some of the in-the-system activism that's going on and all the hard work you guys have been doing, not only with New Hampshire Capital Access, but also the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. So that's a whole mouthful of stuff we're going to be talking about. But before we do that, do you want to just introduce yourself, and how would you describe what you do? Because you do so much different stuff here.
Well, thank you, Toby and Nick, for inviting me on. And I have to say, the studios here are really cool. It's fun for me to be in a different studio. It's not the home studio. The staff here is awesome. And, you guys get water and stuff, which we don't get in Concord. So
it's very sweet.
Water is good for you. So, when I moved to New Hampshire back in 2004, I believe, my wife and I, we were living in California. We wanted to escape somewhere that we thought was a good place to raise our forthcoming children. Mm-hmm. And we have two now. And, when we got here, there was a guy who had formerly been a state rep. He served, I think, 3 terms as a Republican and once actually as a Libertarian, a fellow named Don Gorman. And he and a few other people had been politically active in New Hampshire when they found out that it had been chosen as the Free State Project target. People who had been involved in the Libertarian Party, people who'd just been involved, taxpayer-type groups, they kind of got together and said, okay, well, what are we going to do with these people as they come in? How can we take most advantage? Let these people know how to get it in work, how to be useful. And really, the Liberty Alliance is the nucleus that they formed. The idea was it was not partisan. So you didn't have to come, well, I'm not one of them. I'm not a libertarian. I'm a Democrat. I'm a Republican. It's an alliance. It's easy to get in.
People who believe in liberty.
Liberty people. It's not that they're Free Staters or Libertarians or Democrats or Republicans or Martians. There were people who wanted to be left alone, largely. And from that small beginning, it all sort of grew. What really amazes me is the new blood that comes in all the time. New people who are willing to pick stuff up and take it like one peg further. I'm an IT guy. I'm a computer geek. The website for the Liberty Alliance used to be a shambles. I brought it up to like 0. And then the guys who took it over after me, I brought it up to like, wow, you guys are like pros. This is cool.
And that website is nhliberty.org. And from there you can find all sorts of what you do, from the pro-liberty candidates list, so wherever, if you're in New Hampshire, that is, the pro-liberty candidates list. So you guys do the hard work of going through the list of what the candidates stand for, and you say, well, these ones stand for liberty, these ones don't, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. And there are hundreds of people that work on reviewing all of these bills, all of these legislators. It's a big task. And I'm really pleased that so many people are willing to donate their time to that. Now, you were talking about, what's going on in Keene, and what's going on in Keene is sad. The gentleman that came in the bottom in the primary here, Andrew Carroll, I believe would be the most incredible, potentially powerful man in the House of Representatives were he elected, because I've heard him talk. I've heard his speaks. He reminds me of no one more than Neil Kirk, the mastermind, the power orator of the New Hampshire House of Representatives, the man who gave the great speech about our federal boots on the march with respect to Real ID, and single-handedly got a unanimous ITL turned over in the House of Representatives. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen by force of oratory. And Andrew, his background with philosophy, he has all these jaw-dropping, really deep insights into the human condition, and he's modest enough to drop one of those in appropriately into a sentence and leave you go, wow, that's smart. And he'll say something like, yes, it was Immanuel Kant. And you go, oh, well, okay. He'd be so powerfully great. It's just such a pity that he doesn't have that he has a giant lead weight attached around his neck that says Free Keene on it.
Right.
And he has to be Harrison Berger on to shake that off.
Right. And for some of the people who are just first viewing this, a lot of the activism that goes on in Keene is way outside of the political realm. It's to the point of civil disobedience. I mean, on the way to the studio, I saw they were smoking pot once again on out of the square.
But you say that as if it wasn't political.
Okay, out of the system, political. I mean, you're not.
Which system is that?
The political realm of going and voting.
How is it not political?
Well, it seems like it's not in the system. It's out. It's trying.
I mean, it's not related to democratic process of voting.
Right, or it's
which does not mean all politics is democratic.
And I think that there is definitely time for civil disobedience. And Andrew Carroll, I mean, his civil disobedience a year ago with cannabis, I thought was extremely, extremely effective.
At doing what?
When he actually went out.
At putting the big lead thing around his neck that now says Free Keene. That was very effective.
I don't know. See, I think that in some cases, if it's done well, where you don't have people screaming at the cops.
Oh, look, we're past the point. We're past the point for civil disobedience. We're to the point where you got to use lead or something. The problem is it doesn't work.
So what works?
That's a good question. So far, what I'm seeing, being good neighbors, not being jackasses, volunteering in the community is what works most. And, Andy's done that, and he's to be commended for it. He passionately and truly wants to do good for a lot of people. And I think the hundreds of votes that he got were people that he had touched personally. And I think that's only going to grow for him over time.
Well, and the thing about being good neighbors, that was emphasized during the early days of the project, and that was definitely, a lot of people were conscious of that idea that the best way to reach out to people that were, you're moving into a state. From the very beginning, of course, there was some tension there with some New Hampshire natives because there was sort of a feeling that people were trying to move in and take over. It's important not to be hostile and not to be confrontational and not be a jackass, as you put it, Dennis. Being a good neighbor, being a good person goes a long way. And not being a good person, unfortunately, maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 20 activists can be a total jackball, can completely throw people off. And in many people's minds, that brands an entire group in that same light. Even if 19 out of the 20 are good neighbors, they do help out, it tends to be people who are negative, who are the loudest, who do get the attention. And it's not, getting attention is not the bottom line, really. I mean, I'd much rather have no one know what my name is, and if that was a better way to advance liberty.
Well, if I look at the election results, right, sad for Andy, and there were 1 or 2 other people who were, free staters, who were at the bottom of the ticket in their town. But there were others, and it's surprising. You don't see a lot in the middle. You see people at the very top, the top 1, 2, or 3 in a 7-seat district. The very top person in Andover, Jen Coffey, Free State Project member, one of the people who was critical in working really outside the system and behind the scenes on the Real ID issue, coordinator for the Second Amendment Sisters, very strong Second Amendment advocate. She was top in her town, vote getter. And she's a Free Stater. She's also an EMT. So her job is saving lives, and that's a highly responsible job. You'd be surprising, that's the kind of person that engenders respect among their neighbors. You know, if I look at same district, a fellow named Seth Cohn. You know, Seth's another Free Stater. He's one of the first people to move to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project. He's also the chairman of the recycling committee in his town of Canterbury. He's working to try and make the community a better place. That's what you do. That's what you do.
But what do you do? See, I'm torn on this. I've been torn on this for a while. What do you... I get the people who want to go and yell at the police and join these mob mentalities that really do shine a bad light because it's so frustrating. As you said, we're in a horrible state of affairs right now with the government still growing.
Well, and you're a libertarian, so you see that. But for most people, it's not the media that they watch. It's not the news that they hear. They don't understand what these people are so upset about.
But I get it, though. I want to be one of those people joining in a sense because I get the frustration. I understand where it's coming from. And it's coming from a real place of rights being taken away, being overtaxed, having this huge oppressive government on you. So I get that frustration, and I don't know. I guess I'm kind of torn in a sense of how you handle that. And
you have to know that the people who oppose you politically are human beings who are rational and believe that they're acting in their own good and for the good of the community. That's where you have to come from.
It's not always true, though. There's bad people in political
There
power.
are some. But realistically, in New Hampshire, the stakes are so low, the squabbling is so intense. Mm-hmm. But I don't see it so much. I could name a few individuals, but I won't. I'll be charitable. By and large, I don't see that rotten to the core corruption that is so to the core and pervasive. I see that corruption being outed when it happens.
But people with good intentions who are supporting
We're talking about the state level, at least.
Right.
On the state level, not on the federal level.
Oh, yeah, I don't care who it is in Washington.
We're talking about like, the state.
The hive of scum and villainy has nothing to do with what I talk about.
Right. Just wanted to clarify that because we are. I don't think a lot of people understand the political nature here in New Hampshire. It's a volunteer system essentially. You're paid to be a representative $100 a year
before taxes. Yeah.
Before taxes or something, and mileage to get to Concord. So you're not talking about career politicians so much. You are talking about neighbors who you can call on the phone and you'll get their kids, and then their kids will give the phone to their.
I'll never forget the first time I called my state rep, and I got an answering machine. And, things spring, it's just around the corner, beep. Wow, that's not like California. Or, you call and you go, oh, Daddy's in the bathroom, can you call back? Oh, okay, Sonny, you tell Daddy to come, It's not like that other places, and I'm so grateful that we have a citizen legislature. It's how it was meant to be, really.
Okay, so what does someone, in my point of view, do? You've got the frustration, you see it. How do I channel that into something that's effective?
Well, I think you are. I think for a lot of people, the creative medium, hey, you're a nice guy, good-looking guy. I'd say, yeah, get on television. If that's what you do, if it's that communicative thing. For me, it's the individual communication, really, with legislators, with people who've been elected. Very often, they're put in these situations and they don't know. I mean, someone who's just elected to the state house and they're put on, the Lord knows what, the transportation committee. Wow. So they're making all these decisions now about whether you can text while you drive. They don't know. I mean, they never really thought about this particular issue deeply from a philosophical standpoint before. They want people to be safe. They want to be benevolent. They want to use their office appropriately. That kind of one-on-one communication, as they say, to call your rep, don't just call your rep. Know these people. Talk to them. Influence them.
How much success has there been with that? I mean, I know we've just come
God,
out
there
of.
have been such successes.
I mean, with the primary we just had, you mentioned 2 cases, but overall,
I'll
how are things going?
The biggest success story that I ever witnessed politically was not an elected person, and was not in the legislature. At the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance dinner, annual dinner this past a couple of months ago, the 2010 dinner. One of the individuals who was present was a state representative, Dan Itza. His wife was also present. And often we don't get to see too much of her. They're very busy people, and she does a lot of things taking care of their very sick child at home. She's a truly good person that a lot of people know. And there was a point during the Liberty dinner where one of the speakers, a Professor Jeffrey Myron from I forget which university, and I really should know, he's a fantastically intelligent guy, talked about prohibition, the modern prohibition that we have, and the consequences and about ending it. We had quite a bit of not just Q&A, but general group discussion after that very interesting and insightful discussion. And this lady stands up, well-respected, well-known wife of a very conservative state representative, and says, I am a former prohibitionist. Now that is a victory. All these other people in the room for whom their entire experience with marijuana policy, with drug policy, has been that it's a crime, it has to be fought, you have to defeat this enemy of the people. It became a lot easier for a lot of these people that have been hearing this message to take that one step and you say, you know, I agree with her. Because I can agree with her. I can't agree with her. Al Baldessaro from Londonderry, by the way, top vote getter in Londonderry in his Republican primary just yesterday. Very, you know, he's a Marine, he's an ex-Marine. Very conservative guy. He went our way on tax and regulate, I believe. And certainly he went our way on medical. And that was not easy for him. He was a prohibitionist up until perhaps 3 days before that vote.
Oh, wow.
And standing there in the gauntlet where all the reps are coming in and out and we're just trying to make our last-ditch efforts to influence them with our little gold standard, our voting recommendation sheet, enough people that he respected had been over the points with him clearly enough, dispassionately enough, factually enough. It was impossible for him to maintain his old policy stance, and he switched. That's a victory. That's a real victory.
What do you think it would take to get more victories like that? Enough to actually make larger and larger and larger waves? Because right now, there are definitely victories there, but we're still fighting back the ever-encroaching government, and it's still getting larger. What do you think it would take to actually be able to get the ball rolling back the other way?
3 dozen people in the House of Representatives and 4 in the Senate.
And where are we at right now?
Well, I mean, it depends
I
on
know
how you
there's
count.
still the election coming up right now, but I mean, you're definitely climbing up there. I mean,
I see a lot of Liberty people, strong Liberty. I mean, my God, Jim Forsyth won his primary handily by a landslide for state Senate. To be very frank with you, at this point in time, I think we have one decent state senator, and that's Mr. Gallus, John Gallus from Coos County, who is, I think he thinks of himself as a true conservative Republican. I see him as a fiscally conservative, socially liberal, what do you call that kind of person?
Usually libertarian.
Yeah, he's pretty much libertarian. That's one. I'll take one. But Mr. Forsyth would be a second. And I didn't think that we could get really any kind of toehold or caucus in the Senate for years. I mean, the Senate's big business. I mean, that's tens of thousands of dollars just to run a primary. Mm-hmm. And I see us getting footholds there. Jim is a very strong candidate and a very strong speaker. He'll be able to influence minds that I would have thought were out of our grasp.
yeah, if he was in it before, we'd have medical marijuana because that would have been the override
Yes.
right there. So we would have already had that because we got through in the House and it was just fell a vote or two short in the Senate, I believe.
Well,
So
my
that's
true
just one
hope,
example.
my true hope is that we retain John Lynch. I think that's
I
likely.
don't like John Lynch. He's a short, small man and he upsets me greatly. But
Well,
that's,
I think he was willing to truly stand up principled for getting out of Real ID, no matter what the repercussions were from Washington, and that earns you spades in my book. I think he's a guy who's against a seatbelt law, which is not very popular in his party. I think he's a guy who's against any kind of broad-based sales or income tax. He doesn't feel that's right for New Hampshire, and neither do I. I'd say there's a guy who I can agree with a lot of really important things on. There's a guy, same-sex marriage. That got implemented, and I consider that a success. Now, he's taken the wrong stance on medical. With 2 more Senate votes, we could have overridden that one wrong stance. And who knows, maybe if he feels the heat, he'll see the light.
I think eventually they all will. I mean, eventually we're going to get there.
typically, yeah, I mean,
at least on that one issue.
Yeah, and well, governors don't typically like to be overridden because it doesn't look good when you're going against the will, what's really the will of the people more closely when you're going with representatives. But, I mean, I would to some extent agree that Lynch probably not the worst governor out there because really...
Well, that's awfully generous of you.
He hasn't done very much, I guess is what I would say.
Well, he keeps
Has
his
he?
mouth quiet a lot.
I've seen
Well,
more.
he managed to steal $100 million from
There was
from medical practitioners, and I find
There
that to
was
be
that.
troublesome. Of course, he did
troubles
that
me
with
a
Kelly
lot.
Ayotte. He did that with Kelly Ayotte's okay, that this is legal. So, you know, if you're getting bad advice, you may make some bad decisions.
well, yeah, that was the whole.
And Kelly
other
Ayotte,
thing, who just won.
Kelly
Who
Ayotte,
won
who
by a
won
hair.
530. Wait, I've got
Mine
this
was
one.
not one of them, I can tell you that.
537 votes. There were 140,000 plus Republicans voted in that primary. 537.
Who's supposed to vote? So you're going to be a recount, you think?
I hope so.
Probably.
I'm not that thrilled by Ovid LaMontagne. He frankly kind of scares me.
You're not always going to get good choices.
But at least he takes a pretty serious independence from Washington kind of stance. And I like that because I think that's going to be necessary. And I do believe that we are in big trouble on the Washington front.
Well, my thoughts on the Washington front is it's just a big thing waiting to implode eventually. Anyway,
I think
it's going now.
it's the currency. I am completely a wackazoid when it comes to predictions of the economy. I believe there's going to be a currency crisis. I think the dollar is going to implode, and I think there are going to be people who have actual stores of value like precious metals or foreign currencies, and people who don't.
People have guns and people have
See, I don't think we're going to Mad Max world. We're just going to poor America world.
It happened in the Soviet Union. I mean, the world didn't end there.
Other currency.
Right.
I mean, it's not necessarily the end of the world, but personally, I mean, when we're dealing with the political process here, it's so accessible on the New Hampshire level relative to what you can do on the federal level.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's just a leviathan.
That's a train that's on the way to crashing.
No, and even if you did get relatively good people into office in Washington, I mean, there's so many bureaucracies. They're so deeply entrenched.
Right.
So much administrative law that you'd have to do away with, not even legislation, that I wouldn't worry too much about it. I mean,
it's going to take care of itself.
I think you're better off running for a city council position or a selectman position.
And, I see that
than
all the
you are running
time,
for
even in the
president.
state. I see people who are really great candidates who could do awesome, awesome things, and then they run for U.S. Senate, U.S. Congress, and I think, my God, if you had run for state Senate, you would have A, won, and B, started to make your policy vision a reality.
Yeah, I think tons of change could happen on the local level, but then again, who wants to sit through city council meetings?
Well,
Well, it's not for I mean, obviously not everybody's going to want to get deeply involved necessarily in running for office.
I think local politics, you have to be a little bit. I mean, let's be
Somewhat
honest,
involved.
I'm a busybody. You have to be like wanting to run things, and that's, that has to be done apparently in the public sector. State rep is a whole different cat, and I do see one of the problems that we have is that people get popular locally, and then they get sent to Concord. It's a whole different game. It's a whole different set of tools, a whole different set of policies, it's a whole different set of problems. It's not like deciding whether there should be a roundabout, one-way signs, are we going to lease this building?
It's a lot more emotional, too.
Oh, yeah, the stakes are so small, it has to be very emotional at the local level. Everyone knows everyone. You're either in or you're out.
All right, so we have got about 5 minutes left here. I wanted to talk a little bit about, we do have people, we've been talking a lot about the New Hampshire politics here, and we do that a lot, but there are people from around the country watching this, and thinking about the Free State Project.
Around
in
the
New
world,
Hampshire.
actually. I mean, we are on the web. So.
That is true. We've actually gotten emails from people in other countries saying that they heard about the Free State Project from Free Minds TV and moved here from other parts of the world. So we are
pretty awesome.
actually getting out there to other people. And a lot of what they've heard is some of the stuff that's going on in Keene. So I did want to just say, what would the pitch be for the other side to civil disobedience?
Okay.
And is there room for civil disobedience in your book? What do you think?
I think there is. We're nowhere near the point where that would be, and I think that it's been so tarnished, it just can't be. But I would say to anyone, if you're a responsible person and you have responsibilities in your life, and you want to be in a community where other people are responsible people with responsibilities who are trying to make a change for the better in the world, yeah, that's happening in spades all over this state. And those are unfortunately the kinds of things that don't make great news items. I mean, people smoking pot and yelling through bullhorns and chaining themselves to trees or whatever they're doing is not really how the debate, how the discussion, how the process of changing a culture happens. I don't think. And neither do most of the people that I know that are now, selectmen or serving on school boards or just helping out at food pantries.
Yeah, well, that's certainly, I mean, in the local community, that's certainly not how people think about it. I mean, that's one of the reasons we wanted to discuss this on the show, because it comes up a lot. A lot of the protests, whether you're talking about the topless protests, open container protests, they've got a ton of attention. They are big talking points in the community. But even people who are coming from a relatively pro-liberty position to begin with, people who might not be necessarily principled libertarians, but they're leaning that way and they've moved in that direction, it's been counterproductive. It's not just that it's not productive, it's that people I know in the community, a lot of you, who were relatively open to the ideas of liberty, stopped moving in that direction, and in some cases have just been reactionary to it and moved in the other direction just to say that they're not affiliated with that particular group or that
and also
particular
because, frankly,
act
if
of
I lived
activism.
in Keene and I saw the kind of shenanigans that were going on in Keene, I would want these people removed too. I would like to be able to take my 2-year-old down to the park and just play and just be able to use the park to play in. And yes, that could be done if there's a bunch of people massed there with, I don't know, drum circles and whatever they're doing, but it's just not what I thought I was paying for with the park. I don't think everyone else thought they were paying for with the park when they bought the frickin' park.
Right. All right. Well, we are running out of time here, but real quick, I wanted to plug. You do a show that I think it airs right next to our show here at Cheshire TV, at least. It's New Hampshire Capital Access. That's NewHampshireCapTV.com.
NHCapTV.com. All of our shows are right there. NHCapTV.com. We have a podcast. We have video podcasts, so you can watch us in line. It's very cool.
Right. It is. It's an excellent show. So I definitely recommend that to people. Also, nhliberty.org is the website to find out. I mean, it's probably the best resource if you don't know who to vote for.
If you want to get connected.
Right. It's an awesome resource. And of course, if you want to help out, if you are someone who wants to get into the political realm, you've got all sorts of jobs for people, calling people, making phone calls, going and talking to people. There's always room for that.
Absolutely.
So, well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think is that all it for the plugs? I know you do so much here, and I know you've got a ton going on with the lecture going on last night. I just want to make sure that I'm not leaving anything off here.
Hey, we've got a state to take.
All right. Anyways, hope to have you on again sometime and update us on what is going on. Maybe talk a little bit about some more specific. So thank you so much. Until next week, log on to freemindsmedia.org. There's the radio show is up there, the TV show archives, the blogs, all sorts of ways to contact us. All the archives of the shows, hundreds of hours of content, freemindsmedia.org. And until next week, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
Don't forget to join him, nhcaptv.org.
.com.
.com, I'm sorry, nhcaptv.com. Have a good night.